Shatter. I'm not so sure they can move. Nope, the countdown has started. The amazing run of the 2-seed Riptide will continue as it ends Shatter's season for the second year in a row.
If the Kiwis can't beat them, I don't know who can.
Well, up next for Riptide in the round of 16 is a date with Hypershock.
In the penultimate episode of BattleBots Season 7, there were only 16 bots left in the tournament to win the giant nut. The round of 16 is where things start getting real. Generally speaking, the decent but still pretty meager robots are filtered out, and you start to get the really brutal matches between legends. For example, we have Lockjaw vs Witch Doctor, Sawblaze vs Monsoon, Copperhead vs Endgame, and Riptide vs Hypershock. The round of 16 brought us Endgame vs Minotaur. The opening fight of the episode was the rematch between Black Dragon and Ribbot. Their first encounter in the 2020 quarterfinals is a popular fight from that season, because of Black Dragon winning despite being on fire for 2 minutes straight. Ribbot, like before, chose to use their vertical spinner. Mild spoilers, but Ribbot only used its vert in the tournament. They only used their undercutter against Jackpot, who they lost to. In 2020, Ribbot didn't really do anything, and both bots are generally the same externally, aside from their forks. The beginning of the match was pretty even. Black Dragon got under Ribbot, who then countered and flipped Black Dragon over. Ribbot followed it up with 2 beefy uppercuts, costing Black Dragon a fork. It's hard to tell, but it looks like around here, Black Dragon lost its left-sided drive, considering it didn't move at all to distance themselves from Ribbot grinding its side and pushing it against the screws. Without much mobility, Ribbot was free to wail on Black Dragon, and even weapon on weapon, they still won. Black Dragon's drive died near the pulverizer, and they were knocked out for the second time ever in the same season. Much better performance from Ribbot here than last time. They won, knocked out Black Dragon, kept their frog head on, and only lost a fork. As the first bot to advance to the quarterfinals, they're gonna face either Hydra or Whiplash. There aren't many Season 1 bots still competing, and even less that haven't faced each other. But we've got one matchup that hasn't happened yet, Lockjaw vs Witch Doctor. Yeah, honestly, even as a Lockjaw fan, it was gonna get slaughtered here. Witch Doctor easily has the stronger weapon, is faster, and more durable. And also doesn't have giant exposed wheel. Lockjaw brought their drone Spitfire. The drone had actually faced Witch Doctor before when they were still with Sub-Zero, and they got sniped by shrapnel. This was definitely going to be a driving battle. Witch Doctor did this reverse juke, which I don't know what the goal was. Maybe baiting Lockjaw to attack their backside before reversing? Either way, Lockjaw pivoted quickly, and went in for the first interaction. It wasn't a big hit, but Lockjaw did pop Witch Doctor up. Okay, so Lockjaw seems to have a small weapon advantage actually. Let's see how they follow it up. Oh my god. It looked like Lockjaw tried to go around Witch Doctor, but ended up making their tire clip against Doctor's spinner. Honestly, props to Donald Hudson for having Lockjaw perform as good as it has, because those wheels easily get clipped if the bot isn't facing head-on with its opponent. I know there are benefits for exposed wheels, but at least Hypershock has durable go-kart wheels that can take a couple shots. Witch Doctor quickly dismantled Lockjaw after, and it was beaten really badly by the pulverizer, where it lay immobilized. Yeah, don't let Witch Doctor get an opening. Lockjaw's official Season 7 photo showed new forks that they never used. I feel like they would have protected the wheels more, and also have, I guess, more floor scraping surface area. Of course, hypotheticals don't matter, because Witch Doctor beat Lockjaw to a pulp and is going to the next round. Moving on to Malice vs Minotaur. Surprisingly, Minotaur hasn't faced many horizontals. In the 34 matches prior to this, it's only faced Warhead, Tombstone, Gigabyte, and Bloodsport. Overall, they've had mixed results against them. They easily beat Warhead and Bloodsport, but lost to Tombstone and Gigabyte. Not many people favored Malice here, since it doesn't have the reliability or power of Tombstone, or the armor of Gigabyte. The team chose their strongest weapon, Big Red, at the advice of Ray Billings and Paul Ventimiglia, who've both beaten Minotaur. Minotaur and Malice cautiously approached each other, but Malice attacked first and hit the corner of Minotaur, sending both robots flying. Minotaur landed upside down and was trying to self-fight before Malice attacked again and sent Minotaur into the screws, where the drum spinner sent itself recoiling across the opposite side of the box. Minotaur finally self-righted right before a weapon-on-weapon hit that sent both bots spinning. This hit shattered Malice's steel tooth, and both weapons slowed down. Minotaur pushed Malice around before its drum came back, though it seemed much weaker, and they only really landed small hits until time ran out. Malice definitely was impressive in the opening seconds, but after the weapon-on-weapon hit, Minotaur came back for the rest of the match. Minotaur won a unanimous judges' decision and advanced to the Grade 8. The top seed that's not Byteforce is actually making it far. Really good season for Malice, definitely an improvement from last season at least. Apparently in RoboGames they did really well as White Rabbit, so they're definitely someone to look out for next season. Speaking of the top seed, pre-season number 1 rank and World Championship 6 top seed Endgame is fighting Copperhead. I don't really need to introduce Endgame, it's a former champion and has won 2 tournaments, but they have shown a consistent weakness to drum spinners. Well, only really Minotaur, but many were wary of Copperhead. They are a drum spinner, but they play the ground game and can't go weapon first like Minotaur. Copperhead has had a pretty good season so far, and I have to mention this every video. Funnily enough, both elite robots lost to... you know. Endgame chose to use its piano key configuration, though many expected them to use a still unused thick wedgelet setup. This fight was probably going to be a weapon-on-weapon slugfest. The very first hit flipped Copperhead over, and Endgame followed up with another hit that sent Copperhead doing backflips. Once more, both robots went weapon on weapon, and Endgame won yet again. Typically, drum spinners beat other vertical spinners when they hit each other because they usually have a smaller diameter, meaning they spin faster RPM-wise, which is why Minotaur usually wins weapon on weapon unless they face a steep wedge. Copperhead only spins at 140 miles per hour, and doing some basic calculations, they should spin at around 6,000 RPM, which is around the same speed as Endgame, so I guess that's why they aren't overpowering Endgame. And also low ground. Upside down again, Copperhead and Endgame charged at each other, and Endgame uppercutted Copperhead hard. Copperhead is a tank, so they weren't too phased, especially now that Endgame shattered its weapon bearings, meaning its bar was locked up. Without their weapon, Endgame was forced to just push Copperhead around, and while they did usually have the low ground, Copperhead slowly nicked off each fork and key, since their drum was able to grind underneath their own forks. Eventually, they shattered Endgame's orange Hardock's front armor. As the match progressed, Endgame turned into, as Chris said, a silver box. Still, Endgame was aggressive, and their flat front actually helped them not get launched as they were pushing Copperhead around. Even then though, Copperhead still grinded their aluminum chassis, and actually did land a big shot that sent Endgame upside down. For the first time ever since its addition in 2019, the self-righter on Endgame was forced to be used, and flipped the former champion back up to continue fighting. Again, they went back to ramming, but Copperhead sent them spinning in the air like a helicopter. In the closing seconds, Endgame tripped over debris and landed stuck on its face before the buzzer rang. Despite a valiant effort from Endgame, Copperhead won unanimously from the judges. You could see Endgame try to spin up its weapon at various points before it locked up. Now, I actually did predict Copperhead would win from the preview pictures and knowing Endgame's drum weakness. Oh yeah. Endgame falls in the round of 16 again, and Copperhead moves to face either Hypershock or Riptide. In 2018, Monsoon defeated Sawblaze in the round of 16. Now that they're meeting here again, Jameson Go has a chance at redemption here. In their initial encounter, Sawblaze did show much better control before they exposed their backside, and Monsoon shredded their tires and broke their saw arm. Sawblaze does tend to make driving mistakes in very important matches, like against Endgame and Witch Doctor. Still, Sawblaze definitely had the advantage of being lower to the ground, though that weapon of Monsoon is deadly. For this match, Sawblaze was modified to have UHMW eyelashes, similar to the ones used against Scorpios to protect its saw arm.
Let the bot battle begin!
Sawblaze scooped up Monsoon, but right after they swung their saw down, they wheelied for a moment and Monsoon landed a big uppercut. But Sawblaze recovered and their forks prevented Monsoon from landing any hits, and Sawblaze pushed them around the box, occasionally hitting them with their saw. Monsoon's spinner stopped working, and Sawblaze responded by slamming into Monsoon. Without their bar spinning, Monsoon did the thing, where basically it was stuck at a weird angle where its wheels couldn't touch the ground. Sawblaze left them to get counted out, and Monsoon was eliminated. So, Sawblaze gets its redemption and faces the top seed Minotaur in the quarterfinals. Sawblaze actually did fight Minotaur in the first fight of Season 6, and actually won that fight pretty dominantly. But anything can happen at this level, and Sawblaze vs Minotaur was a really good match, so let's hope the sequel is even better. There's one more rematch left in this episode, and it's Hydra vs Whiplash. Whiplash defeated Hydra in the 2020 quarterfinals, ending Hydra's very dominant reign at the time. The ground game decided the first match, and it would decide it here, since both robots are still more control-oriented. Hydra used their normal piano key front end, while Whiplash used their long forks that won them the fight last time. They also kept their disc to get the edge and damage. Honestly, there wasn't really anything drastically different here than in 2020. Whiplash took its time to approach while Hydra came out much quicker, but it hit a couple seams in the floor.
You gonna be on my f***ing time?
Whiplash tried to bait Hydra's flipper, but this time Hydra proved to be lower and flipped to Whiplash twice. The robots locked horns again, but Hydra still got underneath Whiplash and landed a third flip. The panel protecting the top of Whiplash's arm got dislodged, and it looked like it was stopping the disc from spitting, so the bot had to take some time to tear it off itself. Hydra hung back while Whiplash was fixing itself, and that actually worked out in their favor, because Whiplash came in to attack from overhead, landed a good shot, but that exposed their backside for Hydra to scoop and launch. Whiplash landed upside down, and I guess the lifter couldn't take the stress, because the robot couldn't self-right. Simple to say, Whiplash was immobilized and counted out. Ribbot, Sawblaze, and Hydra get the revenge this episode, but Hydra has to face Ribbot next in the quarterfinals, which is also a rematch from the 2021 tournament. I've never owned a cat, but they're cool. And in my experience, the coolest cat in my opinion is Mad Catter. Mainly because most cats aren't usually made of metal with a spinning blade on its face. Mad Catter is here in the round of 16 for the first time after beating Claw Viper, and it's facing Huge, the supposed Vert Killer. Now I actually don't know if that was what Huge was designed for, or if that's just what it happens to be good against. But Huge is the hyped up counter for all the low, generic, vertical spinners. It took a while, but it sure is living up to the hype, because Huge has been destroying every single opponent this season, and it's undefeated at this point. Mad Catter was aware of its disadvantage, so they modified their lifting arm to be more of a lance harpoon shape, in order to prod at Huge along with shooting flames at the big wheeled menace. It was dubbed the Huge Poon. Huge and Mad Catter both came out of their squares quickly, as Mad Catter was shooting out sparks and flames. When both robots collided, Huge's blade sliced off a piece of the cat's top armor, as well as destroying their dislodged flamethrower. Mad Catter responded by taking off a chunk of Huge's left wheel, but it was only a small piece, and Huge continued its assault on Mad Catter, breaking a light in the process. Mad Catter's bar spinner died, so it could only push and poke at Huge. Huge didn't care about Mad Catter's charges, because with their blade free to spin up, they tore off chunks of Mad Catter whenever they came in close. Mad Catter did try their best to push Huge around, but had no way to deal damage, and they lost one of their wedges and their harpoon. Huge's blade slowed down at the halfway point though, so the fight was just the two robots bumping and driving into each other until it was over. Much like Endgame vs Copperhead, the winner here was pretty decisive. Damage and aggression is key, so Huge won unanimously. Ooh, that rhyme scheme. Facing off against Witch Doctor in the quarterfinals. Another Metavert for Huge to eat up. The last fight of the episode is Riptide versus Hypershock. Riptide decimated Shatter in the round of 32 for the second time, while Hypershock got a decisive judge's decision against Lucky. These two are very destructive.
Four-wheel drive vertical spinners.
So this battle is going to end in a violent KO either way. Hypershock chose to use their thicker single disc. Their strategy was to avoid weapon-on-weapon hits and hit Riptide's weaker flanks. Alright, let's see how Hypershock's strategy did.
The bot battle begins. There's the first
Will Bales turned too early and accidentally fed Hypershock's back right tire into Riptide's egg beater, which flicked Hypershock into the corner. Hypershock was knocked upside down, and with both weapons at full speed in opposite directions, apparently Hydra was the first to make a robot hit the ceiling, but Riptide for sure got the record for highest pure height. However, Hypershock actually survived the hit and landing, and it tried to find some space, but Riptide chased them down and sent them towards the screws. Riptide destroyed one of Hypershock's front tires, but Hypershock did push Riptide back for a bit, and you know the blue egg beater's speed was cranked up because Riptide started roaring, like a beast getting angrier. Riptide's hum is pretty unique in that it's more of a shriek instead of the ominous hum, which apparently from the Wayachi livestream is just the belt slipping according to weapons operator Sid. Anyways, Riptide broke free from Hypershock's grip and ripped off the other front wheel, and finally left Hypershock to be counted out at the corner near the judges. Well, that sure was violent and historic. For anyone not really invested in the sport and curious, that ceiling hit was caused by, well, Captain Ethan Kurtz explained it well enough in the show, but with the two rotating weapons spinning in opposite directions, the combined energy of both Hypershock's disc and Riptide's egg beater worked together in launching Hypershock up. So, Riptide and Copperhead meet next in the last quarterfinal setup, and the rest of the top 8 looks good. This episode was pretty good, and probably my favorite round of 16. If Endgame vs Minotaur didn't exist, at least. Happy late Thanksgiving, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, holiday, whatever, depending on when this comes out. That's about it. See ya.